Hey, welcome to Marc Clarke on the Mark, and today is a special day for me. My 13-year-old teenager didn't know the plan, but Sydney's my oldest, and I was so curious because she said she wanted to see the movie 12 Years a Slave, and so we just got finished watching it, and I was just curious from a perspective of a 13-year-old. So first of all, Sydney, you said something I thought was interesting after the movie. You said you didn't cry during the movie.
Yeah.
It hit you after the movie. So
Yeah.
give me your take of the movie.
So it's a very intense movie. And with me, I couldn't really wrap my head around it, like you said earlier, because it was just so intense and so true, because that's actually how it was. But um, I think after the movie, I sort of got all of it in my head, and
Hmm.
that's when the emotion sort of kicked in. But like, yeah, it's very very intense, but it's a true story. So it's really interesting watching this and seeing how outrageous it is, but knowing that it actually happened.
Yeah.
So it's just a very,
Well, and I think for me, I think the thing about slavery is a lot of times people will say, we've talked so much about it, get over it, let's move forward, and that's not just. I mean, black people say that, that was the past, now is now. But I think when you see how it was, it makes you say to yourself, "I never thought about that." Right? Didn't you have that feeling like I never thought about you never? I mean, you had an image of slavery,
yeah,
but you didn't think that yes, there were places where people were free, intermixed with people who were still enslaved, which has to be crazy. So the
yeah,
only thing that separated the person who's free for the person who's enslaved is a piece of paper. Show
right.
me your papers, and that didn't mean anything. They could just send you back into slavery. And so what about the violence? Had you thought about it before seeing it? What effect did it have on you seeing all the violence or seeing the realness of the violence?
Well, like you said, it we all had an idea of slavery. We all knew it was violent. We all knew it was bad. But watching the movie, I was just like taken aback by how like violent the violence was.
Right?
And it's sort of like I knew there was going to be violence, but I didn't know it was going to be that like gruesome.
Hmm.
So I guess it was more than I expected, definitely.
How
So
do you think being a 13-year-old and seeing how 13-year-old girls like you were treated? How did it make you feel as a girl, a woman, and a black woman?
it made me feel sort of. Hmm, it definitely made me feel different. Mainly because the women were like on some levels, I don't want to say higher, but at a different level than men were.
Mm-hmm.
But then sometimes they really weren't.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the movie, that one part when I think her name was Patsy, was
Mm-hmm.
being beat up by the tree.
Mm-hmm.
That was like the same type of thing that happened to Solomon early in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of strange looking at my life now, um, compared to the movie, because I think it's definitely not as slavery was,
Mm-hmm.
but it just sort of changed my view.
Mm-hmm.
So I so yeah.
Well, I think, and I think when you say a patsy, I think of all those talented people
Hmm.
who didn't have a chance.
Right.
Like, I get emotional. Um, from Patsy to, I mean, all the enslaved Africans who didn't, I mean, to live, to contribute to their life and to the world, you know? And then I think about you guys and all the opportunity. I think that's the other part, like the opportunity that,
Hmm.
you know, yes, racism is still going to exist and sexism is going to exist, but the opportunity that we all have, that they just didn't have, that those enslaved Africans didn't have. What do you think about a lot of people go to these movies and they end up being angry, angry at
Yeah.
white people, angry at the
Yeah.
system. But what do you think? I felt like what I liked about the movie too, what again makes you think, is there are good people and bad people,
Right.
regardless. And if there weren't good white people, then the system wouldn't have stopped.
Yeah.
But what was how did you balance that out? Did you have rage against white folks, or how did you balance it out with that?
Well, keeping in mind that we're all human, it's just that there's going to be bad people and good people. But at this point in history, white people were like just at the height of whatever was going on. So I think when other people watch the film, they get mad because they just see white people as these terrible people who only want to hurt and enslave people who aren't like them and call them their own property. To me, that was only that was present in some parts of the movie because there were some parts when I was just like, ugh.
Mm-hmm.
But I just sort of had to keep the idea in my mind that it was just people, because I don't think it would be fair to suddenly hate white people. Because I mean, what's the difference between hating white people and white people treating African Americans badly?
Hate is hate.
Yeah, it's just
Let me ask you this. Now, you had the two slave owners, one who was a kinder
yeah,
slave owner, and then one who was considered mean or crazy. Now, the kinder slave owner knew that Solomon was not
yeah,
probably didn't deserve to be a slave, or he was probably a free man based on what he did.
yeah.
But he didn't deal with that. Which of the two is more cruel? To not let him to find somebody who's probably not a slave and not seek to free him, or is it the other slave owner who basically in that part of the country, that's what they did and that's how he looked at it. He didn't care. Which one was crueler? Are they
I think
equally
they're
as cruel?
equally. I think they're equally because one, they sort of let their cruelness out in different ways. Like one just did it physically and just was the like the idea that most people had of slave owners like in that time period. But the other one, although he seemed better, he he knew that Solomon wasn't supposed to be there.
Mm.
Like, but he didn't do anything.
Mm.
So in a way, the other one is crueler because he is allowing the other slave owner to just sort of do what he did to Solomon because he's not saying that he doesn't belong there. He's just sort of letting it slide almost.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's just
Equal.
Yeah.
Equal cruelty. So a lot of people say, a lot of black people say, I can't handle it. I'm not going to see this movie, another slave movie. I don't see how it can give me anything, or it can add to me. It just will remind me of the pain of the past. Do you agree with that, or would you recommend that people see the movie?
I recommend people see the movie because although you might think it will remind you of the pain of the past might strengthen your future because then you know how far we've gone and know how strong we were to be able to be through slavery and not just gone.
Mm.
So I recommend people seeing it.
That is my 13-year-old teenage daughter, Sydney, and I am Marc Clarke, and this is On the Mark. And again, if you haven't seen 12 Years a Slave, it'd be cool if you got to see it before the Oscars. Just some great performances. And again, for me, I've seen it 3 times now. It's perseverance, like Sydney said, giving you the strength to go through whatever you're going through. Whatever you're going through, it gives you the strength to understand that you can get through it. All right. Thanks so much. And again, on the mark. Thanks, Sid.
No problem.
That's my baby. One of them. I got a whole ton of babies. I got 3.